Last month, the TPP countries met in Chile. This week they are meeting in Canada. So my question is, Chile, well, Australia is in the RCEP, but Chile, Mexico, and Peru, they are not in the RCEP, and they really want to do something with the content of the TPP. They really want to do something. I mean, they don't want to waste the time that they waste in the previous 6 years. No, but that is true. So my point is, do you see some potential to revive the TPP as Japan as a leader? Do you see like they can do something with the TPP without United States? How do you see that that possibility? Because I think that Chile and the other two Latin American countries, they want to do something with that. Thanks.
The TPP agenda, particularly on the really nasty things like investors being able to sue governments and extension of medicine monopolies and also extension of copyright monopolies, all of that agenda was driven by the US because they were acting on behalf of their big pharmaceutical and big media companies, and US companies are the most frequent users of suing governments. You know, they're the largest corporations in the world. So although some countries were willing, were willing partners in that agenda, others only agreed to it because it was the price of getting access to the US market, which is one of the largest markets in the world. So countries like Vietnam and Malaysia, for example, are not keen to have a TPP without the US, because, well, if they would say, well, we don't want, if we're not going to get access to the US market, we don't want to have longer medicine monopolies or, this harsh regime of investors being able to sue governments and other things as well. So I think there's a difference amongst the different constituencies. I think you're right, the Latin American countries want to do something, but there's actually three alternatives. There's a minimal thing where they could just accept the current agenda of the TPP but take the US out. Even that is quite complicated because I've actually read the agreement and the US did a lot of side deals and side letters with different countries, so all of that would have to be taken out. But I don't think all of the TPP countries will agree to that, particularly the ones who have lost, who mainly agreed because of market access to the US. There's another alternative that they try and then renegotiate the whole agenda, which is would take years, basically, because there would be disagreements about, the extent of all these things. Or they might wind up not doing something separately. Now, in the case of the Latin American agreements, there's this thing called the Pacific Alliance, which is Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. Now, there's nothing to stop them if they want to get together and have their own version of the TPP, they could do that. But again, to me, it seems unlikely. Even Chile had doubts about the medicine aspects of the TPP and the copyright monopolies. So why would they do that amongst themselves if they really only did it to satisfy the Americans? So I think our government's really talking, well, our trade minister is saying, this might happen or it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be very difficult because it really was a US agenda, and I don't think all of the TPP countries will want to have it in exactly the same form without access to that market.
Whilst I agree with what Pat says, and given Pat's background, gladly accept what she's saying. My concern is that neoliberalism will find a way, and it wasn't the US government who was driving the agenda of the TPP, it was the US corporations. And when you look at who lobbied the US government the most in the lead up to the TPP and prior to Trump, it was the pharmaceutical companies, by a massive amount the pharmaceutical companies. So they will find a way to get their agenda through, and they will find a way to get their agenda through no matter which country we're in. We know that the US-Australia bilateral trade agreement that we signed under John Howard saw an increase in the cost of medicines here. So it will find a way, and I think that the proposal that the US is now seeking to do a bilateral with Japan, and that Japan will lead the ghost, whatever form that takes, of the TPP, will allow Trump to save face. It will allow Trump to bow to the pressures of neoliberalism while looking his voters in the face and saying, we said no to the TPP because we've got a better deal.
Okay. So hang on. Who's got the microphone? Okay, you go now.
I heard on the BBC World Service last week, I think, that I think it's Japan is lobbying for the UK to join the TPP. Although it's not in the area, to replace the US. Have you heard anything about that?
There's all sorts of things being said about the UK and leaving the EU, etc. The real story is that the UK can't join anything until it gets out of the EU, and that'll take 2 years. They are going around saying they want to have free trade agreements with absolutely everyone, and they're having preliminary talks, but they can't actually enter negotiations legally until they leave the EU, and they won't, it will take them 2 years to do that. Again, I think there's a lot of talking up of this. I mean, I certainly agree, and I said at the beginning of my answer that it's the pharmaceutical companies, the media companies, these other companies that lobbied the US government, and they're lobbying our governments too. And of course they're pursuing this agenda in the RCEP as well, and in TISA. So I'm not being complacent, but I think it will be difficult for them to put the exact pieces of the TPP back together again. We'll have to see what happens.
NHS interest would have precluded agreement to the pharmaceutical companies having fair, freedom.
Can't hear you. No, she hasn't got the mic.
The comment was that the British National Health Service would put some limits on what pharmaceutical companies can do in Britain. That's true, and Britain also regulates medicine prices quite strongly for the same reasons that the US does. That Australia does.
Wait a second.
And I think that the fact that the UK is looking to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the death of the TTIP, the European equivalent of that trade agreement, also shows and reminds us that post the global financial crisis, capital remains in crisis. The previous systems are failing them. This is why Trump was able to get elected, even though Hillary Clinton was heavily backed by capital, and this is why we're seeing the response to Le Pen being a former banker in France. I think the problem for us on the left is that we don't yet have the answer or the momentum to replace that void. So there's going to be that confusion continuing. We have an opportunity at the moment to put the boot into multilaterals and free trade agreements, but whether or not we have the capacity to put the boot in is another question.
Okay.
I was under the impression that India has never recognised international patents on medicines. And as such, I can't imagine they're going to turn around in their policy and accept something other than that. And as a consequence of that, I can imagine that China and the rest of Southeast Asia will stand on the same footing, the same precept. Additional to that, and in line with the no harm thing, what are the consequences of a sovereign state just telling it to stuff off? They're not likely, or they refuse to to recognise these sorts of harmful sanctions? Is the consequence, or is a potential consequence, just some sort of enhanced levy on their economic trade structure or something like that? Are we talking about enhanced prices? Because I can't see that they're going to drop the economy out of the system or something like that. They'll still want the economic transfer. Is it that they'll just sort of be on an enhanced price structure or something like that?
Well, on the first question about India abides by the World Trade Organization rules on intellectual property, which do recognise patents, but they're limited, and they have special exceptions, as I said before, for developing countries. And so what these regional and bilateral trade agreements, particularly the ones led by the US, have done is gone what they call WTO plus. They've extended, each new agreement extends the patents for longer and longer. But the basic agreement at the global level, which most developing countries and India adhere to, is the 20-year patents plus exceptions for developing countries. Now, it's not a wonderful agreement, but it's much less than was being proposed in the TPP. So, and because India is it really is the pharmacy for the developing world, in that it produces most of the generic medicines, and China is the cheaper medicines, and China is the second largest producer. Both of them, those governments have an economic interest in preserving those rules and making sure that people can get access to generic medicines, so they'll buy their products. So it's true that I think India has an economic interest, as does China, in not agreeing to stronger monopolies on medicines for their own laws, for their own domestic laws, or for their customers in the region. And in that sense, I think we've got a good chance if we run a good campaign, and Indian civil society is very strong actually, but in the region, if we run a good campaign of stopping some of that in the RCEP, because there's some division between the main players. It's true that the pharmaceutical companies will still be lobbying for longer monopolies, but there's these other economic interests in generic medicines as well. On the sort of opting out, I think if you look at Latin America, up until recently, there's now some more conservative governments being elected in Latin America, but up until recently, a number of Latin American countries have had trade agreements amongst themselves. There's one called Mercosur and there's another one called ALBA, where they actually have what you could call cooperative trade agreements, and they don't have things in them like investor rights to sue governments. So they actually discuss amongst themselves, as mostly developing countries, how they can have fair trade, if you like. And there's some very interesting stuff going on, like, Cuba will export medical services to other countries, and then they'll export oil to Cuba because Cuba doesn't have any oil, that sort of thing. And it's not just the socialist or radical countries. Argentina and Brazil have been involved in these sorts of relationships as well, up until recently. So it is possible to have different kinds of trade relationships, and if you look at a country like Brazil, Brazil has never agreed to have investor-state disputes. Their parliament just refused to ever agree to any trade agreement that had that in it. And they still get plenty of...
This is what I mean.
Yeah,
why can't they just say stuff,
Yeah, well, part of the reason they're able to do that is because they have regional trade agreements which give them an alternative for trading, more cooperative regional trade agreements. And I think that's the kind of thing that if we had a government that would advocate that, Australia should be advocating that in the Asia-Pacific region too, more cooperative trade agreements with our neighbours particularly those in developing countries, where we could have a mutual, mutually beneficial arrangement instead of an exploitative one.
Yeah, the Philip Morris thing. Yeah, I mean, how can they sort of stand in the face of scientific, proven scientific fact that millions of people are dying annually, yeah, as a consequence of tobacco smoking? How can they possibly turn around and say you're interfering with our profits when we're killing people?
Okay, let's.
Well,
hang on a second. Take the microphone when you answer.
Just quickly on that, they, in the court case about claiming compensation, they don't have to say anything about the health effects. All they have to prove is that this law caused them damage.
Yeah, but
and that's the problem with ISDS, that if you get arbitrators who are prepared to look at the public health things and say, well, it's justified because this is a public health measure, which is what Australian law said. They went to the High Court and lost in our High Court because our High Court said this is a public health measure and under our law you don't deserve compensation for it. But the problem with international investment law is that it doesn't necessarily take into account those sorts of either health or environmental issues. And the problem with ISDS is that if you sign up to it, you sign up to the whole deal, which means you agree to pay if you lose the case. That's the rub.
Okay, the next question, please.
Oh,
Okay.
Graham Palis, thanks very much for the performance tonight. It was very interesting. My first question, as my memory fails me now, who is the leader of the Australian delegation for these negotiations? Is it the Minister of Trade?
Yeah.
And I've forgotten, what's his name?
Chobo.
Chobo. Well, I mean, having seen him a couple of times on the TV, I can only fear the worst. The previous Mr. Robb, who was lauded as having done a great thing for the country, sort of sold the farm and gave it away and all the rest of it. The other thing is that over years I've read that New Zealand manages to buy pharmaceuticals far cheaper than Australia does for the same products. Is this your understanding, and is it just another case of the rugby syndrome where every time the smart little guy beats the inflated big fellow who says he'll do a lot, but when it comes to the crunch can't? And one more, I see the mention of Veolia suing Egypt. I have no idea of the issues in Egypt. Veolia, of course, is all over the place. Here they do rubbish collection and street sweeping. I can't see them taking that to an independent national tribunal if the local government asks for a pay rise or something for certain people who are involved in some of those tactics. Veolia would do nothing but fight cases if it was everywhere they live they've got this potential backup to their business operation. Anything you can say on any of that? Thank you.
Do you want to answer the one about New Zealand and medicines?
I'm not quite sure how New Zealand manages its equivalent to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, but it is more efficient than ours. It is certainly cheaper for consumers in New Zealand to access medicines than it is for Australians, but Australians pay more for medicines than a lot of other countries do. Not as much as some. In fact, medicines here in Australia are much cheaper than they are in the US, and that tells you about the profit-seeking behaviour. With regard to Veolia, their capacity to sue the Australian government over changes to the wages, the way that they are suing in the Egyptian government, is limited, quite frankly, because those services have long been privatised.
No, it's...
Hang on, let him finish and then you...
The other point is that Veolia is a French-based company. We don't have a free trade agreement with France, so there's no mechanism for them to use. And I think, well, what happened in Egypt was that they had a local, it was actually a waste removal contract with a large city in Egypt. There was a very big rise in the minimum wage, well, comparatively big, like 20% or something, after the Egyptian revolution in 2012, because the wages had been very low and there was quite a big rise. And they did have an investment agreement with Egypt, and so they chose to sue. But it was about the whole contract, but one of the claims they made for compensation was about the minimum wage, the rise in the minimum wage. So they choose their targets.
Okay, next question please.
Ted Mack says that the problem in Australia and basically Western democracies, where there's a binary system of political parties that exchange power every few elections, is that they're basically privatised. The political parties are private entities. They are therefore beholden to those who fund them, and that will always be the case. And the only hope to break this power, which goes from international corporations to political parties in target countries, is to have a Swiss-style democracy where everything's run by the people. The parliamentary democracy doesn't happen. There's direct democracy with effectively the parliament being minimalist, unable to be career-bound, unable to be controlled by parties, and effectively implementing the result of referenda proposals that are decided by plebiscite. Do you think that the way the corporate power in the world is influencing the democracies, particularly in the Anglo democracies that are binary, is always vulnerable to this, and that Ted Mack is correct?
Okay, who wants
Do you want to say something about it?
an opinion? Okay.
Look, I think the more important point is whether it is not necessarily the democratic system under which we live, but our participation within that democratic system. I mean, the open democracy system still requires people to turn up to town halls and have their say. We know that even with our system, even under the premise that the parties are captured to the neoliberalist agenda, we know that we can beat them. We beat them on Medicare. It's a question of mobilising. Well, I think we did. I think we beat them in many respects on Medicare. The question of mobilising people and us speaking with our politicians and holding our politicians to account is the thing that we haven't been doing enough of, whether it's in an open democracy or a captive democracy like ours.
What do you want to say?
I'll just say briefly that I think that the campaign that the Greens and others have been running about stopping corporate funding of political parties is also important. First of all, making funding transparent, and secondly, getting parties to renounce certain types of funding or having laws that stop them having funding. I mean, I think it's quite important that the public health movement pressured the ALP to no longer accept tobacco funding from tobacco companies, and that's one of the reasons why they passed the plain packaging law, whereas the Liberals still accept funding from tobacco companies. That's just one example. So I think there's a range of things that can be done. I agree with Michael that the main thing is people power and people participation, but I think it's important in the system we've got now to expose corporate influence on political parties and to do what we can to reduce it. And that may mean more public funding of election campaigns and limits on what can be spent in election campaigns, all of that sort of debate.
Okay. Who's next, please? Oh yeah, Charles, yeah.
And I'm hesitating because my questioning is is sort of less clear cut and direct. Perhaps if I take up on, first of all, acknowledge that I'm a member of the Labor Party, and my interest, I've had a lifelong interest in increasing the democracy within the Labor Party and the way in which members, but also the community, can influence the implementation of policies by Labor governments, both state and federal, and indeed local government as well. The last meeting, about 10 days ago, I moved a motion with regard to the March for Science, in which I indicated that some problems which science were facing, I made a mistake with one word, but that's not the important one. The word I used was neoliberalism, and it was quickly removed, and there were moments of, don't you believe in freedom? In other words, there were a dozen or 15 people in the room, and there would have been a dozen or 15 different understandings of what neoliberalism is. Tonight, you've been talking about they, the 1%, the corporations, the pharmaceutical corporations. I think it's a nice group to target. But there really is some confusion for me about how I would advance the issues that you've spoken about tonight with my colleagues in the Labor Party. It's a local branch here. We meet up there. Who would all basically agree with what you said. But what's the sort of thing that we would advance in even directing Tanya, not asking her, but actually sort of suggesting that what she should do. But I don't want to even go that far. In our conversation with Tanya, what sort of thing would we say? She's our local member. But more importantly, what sort of, how can the understandings that you've helped us progress, you've helped us learn, how can that be passed to, in my question is about local members of the Labor Party, so that this can move forward and be implemented with the members of the Labor government, not like the last one, but actually scared of what the local members might be saying and thinking.
Okay, who wants to take that question? This is Leah. Yeah.
Well, I do think that the sort of examples that Michael and I have tried to talk about are the best way to introduce people to these topics. I mean, with trade agreements, the issues that people are really interested in are, why should pharmaceutical companies be able to charge more for medicines for longer, or why should the Philip Morris company be able to sue our government when they regulate tobacco? So we've got to learn to talk in plain language and use examples that affect people's lives. I also think the reason I use the word neoliberalism tonight is that actually it was Kevin Rudd who made that into a popular term when the global financial crisis hit. Suddenly people like Kevin Rudd and the Labor Party were saying, we don't believe in the neoliberal theory that says markets work by themselves and government should never intervene. And I think it is important, although it's a piece of jargon, to kind of take hold of that, if you like. And because we were talking about the big picture, I think sometimes you have to use words like that. But if it doesn't suit your audience, you don't have to use those words.
I think the short answer to your question is that when you're speaking with Tanya Plevisic or you're speaking with your party members, the thing to talk about is your lived experience. When was the last time you went to a GP? How much did it cost you? How much did the medicines cost you? What would it mean to your standard of living if the cost of those medicines went up? What does it mean to you if the climate cooks us? What does it mean to you as your lived experience? The more numbers that roll through their doors telling those stories has an impact. I think the worst thing you could do is try and rock up and replicate something along the lines of Pat's talk when you don't have the expertise and the knowledge and the experience behind you to back you up. You go in and tell your lived experience because that's what you know, that's what you feel. The question becomes slightly different when you're talking amongst your colleagues at a party meeting. And although your personal stories are the way to connect, and I strongly believe that you always tell your personal story to connect, there's a question then of actually having the longer debate and taking time to explain what is really meant by neoliberalism. It means freedom, but not freedom for you or me. And so who does it mean freedom for? And really unpacking that sort of stuff. And I keep being counselled not to use neoliberalism, not to use that term because people tune off, people don't want to hear about it. But I think we made the same mistake with socialism. That word over the last 20, 30, 40 years. It wasn't until there was a few textbooks, a few journals that came out before Corbyn and Sanders where they were saying we should reclaim the word, and then you saw the positive effect of Corbyn and Sanders when they came out and they said that they were socialists. People stood and cheered. So I think there needs to be a brave few that go out and use the word but defend the use of it and explain the use, explain what it really means, and again, use your lived experiences to explain what it really means.
I'll persist then.
Yes, you should. Okay. Is there any more questions? If not, we're very close. It is 8:15, so we'll wind up now. So I'd like first of all to ask you to thank both of our speakers, Dr. Patricia Ranald and Michael Whaites, once again for their presentation this evening.